technology will go to China, and then the Chinese Communist Party will decide the ethics and the rules and the.
Would you agree with that, Barry Andrews? And just bearing in mind what one of the gentlemen said there as well, that he needs a guide, and he's looking at you, the regulators, to provide him with that guide and make him feel safe when he's using AI.
Well, I think Sam Altman, the head of OpenAI, he said that we need regulation. Everybody who is at the cutting edge of AI systems development.
He also said he'd be scared out of Europe if the EU put in a very strict law.
Well, he also said, quoting him again, that he didn't think ChatGPT should be used for anything serious. Really? So there's a recognition that AI systems are in a very, very sharp increase in evolution right now, and we've seen so many cases of miscarriages of justice and mistaken identity that its use in the area of criminal prosecutions and law enforcement is, for me, extremely dangerous. And I think you heard from people there; they're all very concerned about it. And I'm not anti-technology.
Would you use
we as legislators, can I just say, well, I have used ChatGPT, but
would you use it to write press releases?
No, not whatsoever. I mean, maybe it's my age. There may be younger people who would be more inclined to use
it for your work. I mean, could it speed up the way EU policy making?
I don't use it for my work, no. And I don't use it for policy making. But look,
and you're not on social media either. No?
I am.
You are?
I am. Yes.
So you don't use WhatsApp?
I use social media, but I try to use alternative channels as well, open channels that don't rely on the surveillance capitalist business model. You know, when it comes to biometric mass surveillance, I'm quite happy to leave that to China, because that's authoritarian technology that we shouldn't be using. And I think Europe should produce the best technology, not be the fastest and not the most technology, but we should be at the forefront of making technology that serves the people, that is in line with our rights and values, and we should be proud. We should be proud of that.
Yeah, of course, you talk about values, but how can it be more important to protect the integrity of a terrorist than protecting the safety of our citizens? Because we have to understand that as responsible politicians, we have to have a good AI act that both respects the possibilities of AI, but also minimizes the unlawful actions. And this is not proportionate what my colleagues are voting for.
You're going to have to find a compromise, and that will, of course, be the challenge as well, to find a compromise with capitals as fast as the end of this year. That is, I think, the objective.
But the exceptions that were proposed by EPP required a level of judicial supervision for real-time facial recognition, which, according to the information that was given to us, is absolutely impossible in the real world. There are circumstances where facial recognition can be used in law enforcement, in any of the circumstances that have just been described, but not in the terms that were contained in the...
I just want to go back to the topic of chat.
Sorry if I may just briefly respond to the terrorist argument. Name me one terrorist that was detected with the technology. There is none. And even Sweden, your own country, does not use facial recognition.
And you've made that point already, and you've made your point loud and clear.
Yes.
And I think figures over in Sweden, and according to a study by Chalmers University of Tech, half of the students are using AI, and many of them are worried because there's no regulation, and 62% said that using them for exams is a form of cheating.
And that's very serious. I mean, I've used ChatGPT and I use AI tools every day, and I think that most of us do. While we're not at the same time, we don't think about it that much.
How do you use it?
But the good thing with the risk assessment system will be a part of the more high-risk AI. Well, you cannot use AI techniques to mislead or cheat or do illegal things.
And just briefly, perhaps we're running out of time, but a message for our viewers who are sitting at home. They're a little bit spooked about AI. They're thinking it'll take over their jobs. They're thinking that perhaps I won't be sitting here soon. It'll be like in the Q8 news agency. They have rolled out a news presenter called Feta who'll be reading out the news, and they're worried that their jobs are going to disappear. Just a brief message for them.
We were told 20 years ago that automation would kill all of our jobs. In my country, unemployment is 3.4%, and unemployment is very low in most countries across the European Union and the United States, where automation has come to a very high level. So yes, it'll have an impact on the world of work, but I don't think we need to worry too much. But it is a very serious threat, and that's why achieving the AI today, this week in the European Parliament is such an important historic event.
Great. Pat?
My message is, don't be afraid of AI as such. You know, artificial intelligence is a buzzword for most things. It really comes down to dumb statistics many times, and so these systems will be able to take over simple tasks for sure, but they will not replace jobs. They will change the jobs that we'll have, but human quality and intelligence will always prevail over machines.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm afraid that is all we have time for on that fascinating topic. I must say, we'll keep an eye on those talks with EU member states and tell you how that proposal goes. But don't go anywhere, because after the break, we'll be taking a look at a proposal for a brand new EU ethics board that many say is not even worth the paper it was written on. Stay with us here on Euronews.
A mí fue el peor de mi vida. Yo decía que yo quería tener un niño, decía que solamente me daban tener uno.
In Europa la sterilizzazione forzata delle persone con disabilità è ancora una realtà. Questa pratica è vietata solo in 9 paesi dell'Unione. Il Parlamento europeo sta discutendo se metterla al bando. Il nostro reportage è su Euronews Witness, lunedì alle 20:30. La prossima edizione del notiziario tra meno di 2 minuti su Euronews.
injustice, and you cannot break us. Leave the flags alone and go combat the organized crime. Go and fight the organized crime.
Le minacce di Putin. Nel suo discorso al forum di San Pietroburgo ha confermato che le prime armi nucleari sono già arrivate in Bielorussia. Dal forum di Brest, risposta interlocutoria del premier kosovaro Kurti alla proposta europea di incontrare Vučić.
Naufragio in Grecia, i sopravvissuti trasferiti in un centro d'accoglienza, i 9 presunti scafisti formalmente in stato d'accusa mentre proseguono le ricerche dei dispersi.
Vladimir Putin, sotto i riflettori del Forum economico internazionale di San Pietroburgo, la sua città, polemizzando anche sull'assenza di partecipanti occidentali a quello che un tempo era considerato il Davos russo, Putin ha accolto un pubblico composto da rappresentanti degli alleati della Russia, inclusa la Bielorussia naturalmente, dove Mosca ha già inviato armi nucleari. Lo ha confermato lo stesso Putin.
Это произошло. Первые ядерные заряды доставлены на территорию Беларуси. Но только первые. У нас это первая часть. Но до конца лета, до конца года мы эту работу выполним целиком и полностью.
Tra tante parole minacciose, il portavoce del Cremlino, Dmitry Peskov, ha poi dovuto precisare una frase ambigua di Putin: la Russia distruggerà solo in Ucraina gli F-16 che eventualmente i paesi occidentali forniranno a Kiev. Quest'anno il forum per il dialogo di Prespa ha riunito i leader dei paesi dei Balcani occidentali a Struga, in Macedonia del Nord. Il tema principale del forum è stato l'integrazione europea, ma la situazione in Kosovo è considerata urgente. Tutti aspettavano una risposta dal premier del Kosovo Albin Kurti sulla possibilità di accettare l'invito dell'Unione Europea ad incontrare il presidente serbo Aleksandar Vučić la prossima settimana a Bruxelles.
Sentencing 30 days with additional detention in remand for our 3 abducted policemen in the northern municipality of Leposavic inside the territory of Kosovo by special military units of Serbian police and military. This is a very tense situation that I need to go back and analyze and in due time reply to Mr. Borrell, who asked for a meeting for next week.
A Struga il premier kosovaro Kurti ha avuto diversi incontri bilaterali con i leader dei Balcani che seguono con preoccupazione la situazione in Kosovo.
This region is very small and every negative impact of negative news from some countries have the negative implication also in our countries.
The high-level officials gathered on this Prespa forum called the leaders of Serbia and Kosovo to return to the negotiating table as soon as possible and find a solution for this problem that burdens the entire region. In Struga, North Macedonia, for Euronews, Bojan Jovanovski.
I migranti tratti in salvo dopo il naufragio della nave sulla quale viaggiavano al largo della Grecia sono arrivati venerdì al centro di accoglienza di Malacasa. Attualmente sono 95 le persone presenti nella struttura che può ospitarne fino a 1500. 9 egiziani arrestati come presunti scafisti a bordo del peschereccio sono stati condotti davanti al pubblico ministero nella serata di giovedì e posti in stato d'accusa. È stato dato loro tempo fino a lunedì per preparare le testimonianze. Sono accusati di aver costituito un'organizzazione criminale finalizzata all'ingresso illegale di migranti, di averli messi in pericolo e di aver causato il naufragio. Le persone in questione, di età compresa tra 20 e 40 anni, avrebbero ricoperto ruoli specifici nella vicenda. 8 di loro sono attualmente in stato di detenzione, mentre il nono è in ospedale.
What happened on Wednesday underscores the need to investigate people smugglers and human traffickers and ensure they are brought to justice.
Sono proseguite nella notte senza successo le operazioni di ricerca e salvataggio nel tentativo di trovare le persone che risultano ancora disperse.
Gino Medera non ce l'ha fatta. Il ciclista svizzero 26 anni è morto venerdì in seguito alle ferite riportate in una caduta avvenuta giovedì in una tappa del Giro di Svizzera. Gino Medera si trovava in coma all'ospedale di Coira, dove era stato trasportato in elicottero subito dopo la caduta. Soccorso privo di sensi, era poi stato rianimato, ma le sue condizioni erano apparse fin da subito disperate. Gino Medera aveva vinto una tappa del Giro d'Italia 2021 con arrivo ad Ascoli Piceno. Forti critiche agli organizzatori del Giro di Svizzera per la pericolosità della discesa.
Scoprite i progetti che danno impulso alle regioni in tutta Europa, i modi in cui migliorano la vita di tutti i giorni e le testimonianze di chi ne ha tratto vantaggio. Tutto questo in Smart Regions su Euronews.
Welcome back to Brussels, my love. I'm Maeve McMahon, and we're broadcasting this week from the European Parliament in Strasbourg, where MEPs chewed over a Commission proposal for a brand new interinstitutional ethics board to clean up their image after some serious corruption allegations 6 months ago. Vera Jourova, that's the EU Commissioner in charge of the proposal, told Euronews' Shandor Ziras that the new body would stamp out corruption in Brussels, and it would be, quote, meaningful, practical and transparent, and all standards would be known to the public. But I'd like to ask my MEPs here, how can it be meaningful and practical if there's no power, really, and there's no teeth in it? It can't sanction.
I agree that it will be mostly a talking shop in the way it's being proposed, because no enforcement power, not even investigation power for those who are supposed to oversee the compliance with ethics codes. You know, we have a problem here in Brussels. There are so many lobbyists, as in no other capital in the world, I believe, and there are job side changes from industry to politics and vice versa all the time with no meaningful regulation.
Well, Washington DC probably has this equivalent amount. But just on that ethics board, Barry Andrews, I mean, was it worth even the presentation this week by Vera Jourova?
It was very disappointing. The budget is €600,000 with 3 staff. It's really impossible to see how that would make an impact or that it's proportionate to the problem that has been identified. But I would say it's very difficult to detect the kind of activity that is now alleged to have occurred that was revealed in the public. It's quite difficult to detect that and to try to create a structure within an ethics body that would detect it, prevent it, or investigate it. That's a very, very big ask to make. And, you know, we have to look back on what's happened and try to find out what it was that brought this to the attention of the police, because there's nothing that we could fashion within these walls that could approximate the powers that the police have for investigation and prosecution and hopefully...
And we're waiting, of course, for those trials. And we did hear that the Greek MEP, Eva Kaili, was hoping to come to Strasbourg this week. She was planning to come back to work. Did you hear anything about that?
We just heard from the news that she was supposed to come back, and I mean, what has been revealed in this whole scandal is just horrible. And we also must understand that this is a criminal activity. It's corruption, really serious corruption. And I'm glad that the Belgian police revealed this and that the law enforcement now are doing their job. And what
meanwhile, nothing really has changed inside here in this European Parliament. There's the 12-point plan of Roberta Metsola, but I think it's just sitting there.
I mean, there is a discussion with all party groups in the European Parliament. How can we make sure to close those gaps where their MEPs could be encouraged to do something illegal or unethical? So we have a discussion, very serious discussion, about how to open up transparency and how we can make sure that our
well, while you're discussing transparency, NGOs like Transparency International have been keeping a very close eye, and our Elie Liberté over in Brussels had a chance to catch up with the director. Take a listen.
There are lots of rules which apply to MEPs, but they're simply not being applied. There is a culture of impunity. MEPs can get away with breaking the rules. There are no sanctions. When there are sanctions, they're very light, and so the Parliament needs to make sure that MEPs who break the rules are sanctioned. We also need to strengthen the rules further, particularly when it comes to conflicts of interest. We think MEPs shouldn't have side jobs because it distracts them from their jobs and creates conflicts of interest. And we need to do more to protect whistleblowers, to protect staff who basically at the moment don't have any protections when they work for MEPs and are not in a position to report wrongdoing when they see it.
Mickey van Hulten there, the director of Transparency International. I mean, a reaction to that. I mean, you're very critical of the ethical board, but still not speeding up putting new rules in place here in the Parliament.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can't understand how anybody has the time to do a side job and do this job as well. I mean, it's so all-encompassing and it's so important to what we do to be distracted by something else that creates a conflict of interest. I've always had a view about conflict of interest that it should be about disclosure rather than prohibition, so that people can make a judgment as to whether the decision you've made or the vote that you cast has influence in any way. But as long as the people understand why and who's inputting into your decision-making process, I think that's fair. We have so many lobbyists that come through the doors.
And it's such a privileged job. I mean, as an MEP, it's probably the best job in the world. You've got amazing perks, amazing privilege, lots of staff to help you do your job. How do you keep your feet on the ground?
It is a huge privilege, and it's easy to lose touch because already financially you're so privileged. You earn more than 99% of the population probably, and also it makes people do things they shouldn't be doing just to hold on to these privileges and to their job. So that's really a danger. You know, corruption is one thing, but what's happening legally in terms of lobbyism and side job and rotating doors, I think is much worse. And I'm not sure everyone realizes the sense of urgency in dealing with this problem, because this erodes the trust in the European Union and it risks actually supporting anti-European and authoritarian forces.
Patrick Breyer on trust. We all know here there's elections taking place, EU parliamentary elections taking place next June, from the 6th and the 9th of June. And we were taking a look at the figures to see whether or not people do trust the EU institutions. And it's 45%. That's according to the figures we took a look at from Eurobarometer. And that's more than they trust their national parliaments, which is only 33%. A reaction to that?
Well, I think that's a product because we have a war going on in Europe. We had the COVID pandemic, and I think the European Union has shown that we can work together to fight these big challenges. And I think that has gained trust among the citizens that we can deliver on very crucial matters. And that's also an obligation, a responsibility that we have as elected officials, elected politicians to be open and transparent. Yes, that's why this kind of scandal is very bad for the whole institution.
Bad for the institutions. And it's not just here in the Commission as well. We've seen a couple of misbehaving high-level EU officials.
We can only take responsibility for the Parliament, and we saw an increase in the overall turnout of the 2019 European elections compared to the previous one. That's the first time it's actually gone up. So we have an absolute duty to continue that progress. And the trust that's placed in the European Parliament by the people has been very severely tested over the last 6 months.
Okay.
So the announcement in relation to an ethics body, I'm afraid, doesn't cut it.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that ethics body, but that's, I'm afraid, all we have time for on that topic. Thank you so much to our panel for your insights, and thank you for watching. See you soon here on Euronews.
Vuoi delle notizie affidabili sul clima e sull'ambiente? Iscriviti alla nostra newsletter Green. Riceverai news e approfondimenti green direttamente nella tua casella di posta. Registrati ora su it.euronews.com/newsletters.
So much bad news about our planet. It's overwhelming.
C'est cette question qui m'obsède. Pourquoi on sait, mais on n'agit pas?
Ça va devenir un moment historique. Human healthy climate. Nous sommes les gardiens de cette planète.
Hello and welcome to Brussels, my love. I'm Maeve McMahon and we're in Strasbourg this week, where MEPs have been gathering and voting on, among other things, a plan to grant all interns a proper paycheck and social protection. With this vote, Parliament wants the Commission to pen a binding regulation on quality traineeships in the European Union. So let's find out how our panel voted on this.
Well, there's two things. First of all, unpaid internships closes internship off to a huge number of people in the population that can't afford to be in Brussels, to live there, to be in. So it's something I've in all of my previous places I've worked completely against unpaid internships. I think also the second point is that we as MEPs, I mean, there's effectively 705 startups or 705 SMEs operating here, and very few MEPs, although they employ people, they don't know how to employ people. And we've seen scandal after scandal about bullying, people being worked far too hard, and there's just a complete lack of understanding of how to manage these issues. So I think the vote this week was really critical.
Okay, indeed, you need to be pretty privileged to afford an internship, because you need perhaps parents to prop you up maybe, or some sort of support, or else you have a part-time job. That's according to studies from the European Youth Forum. But the business community are very lukewarm about the idea. They believe that internships are purely just experiences and that you're not an employee. We spoke to Business Europe, a lobby group. Take a listen.
The EU is very diverse. There are 27 member states. There are very different ways of organizing labor law regulations in the member states. There are also very different educational practices in the member states. And so the response to this, you need to look into the 27 realities, and then you will understand that there are very different categories of traineeships, and most of them, they are not about employment, and it is about participating in a work experience as part of education. And so we have strong doubts that the legal basis in the treaty would allow for that.
Arbor Koglari, a reaction to that?
I agree with him, and I voted against this proposal in the plenary because for me, as a Swedish member of the European Parliament, I do not want to see EU laws on the labour market. We want to have this as a national competence. So I was hoping that the issue on internship would have been more of guidelines and not concrete legislation.
Patrick Breyer, what's your take on all this?
Look, we have EU legislation already when it comes to working hours, for instance, and it's kind of a minimum protection level that we provide. And when it comes to interns, we can't tolerate their exploitation. They need to make a living as well. And that's why I think it's fair enough to provide minimum safeguards that ensure that interns are not exploited.
I mean, the question now, of course, will this ever see the light of day?
I think it's very likely to, because unlike the view that we shouldn't generate labour laws out of the European Union, in fact, much of the social progress in employment has come from the European Union, certainly in the case of Ireland. So I think we really benefited in the labour market from EU legislation. And this is one area where we haven't really spoken up about before. So it's really important to send a very strong signal. I don't agree with the spokesperson from Business Europe. I think there has to be an educational element to it, but it is a hybrid, and interns do make a valuable contribution.
Arbor, you did agree with Business Europe there. So what about people, like Barry Andrews mentioned earlier, people who are a little bit marginalised, they don't have any money, they can't afford to do an internship, and then they're just booted off into the corner of the labour market?
I mean, our citizens can never be misleaded or cheated or discriminated. That's unacceptable, of course. What I do not want on the EU level is that we move the competence that labour laws, social issues, things that are very local and very national are now being regulated on an EU level, and that's what I'm against.
And maybe a lot of governments would agree with you, Arbor. That is, I'm afraid, all we have time for. Thank you so much for being with us. Patrick Breyer, thank you so much as well for being with us here, and Barry Andrews. And thank you so much for watching. If you want to reach out and send us a comment or a reaction, our email address is brusselsmylove@euronews.com. You can also find us on Instagram and Twitter. See you soon here on Euronews and Euronews.com.
Victor vive vicino a Bucarest, la capitale della Romania. Subito dopo la sua nascita 8 anni fa, i suoi genitori hanno capito che il suo sviluppo era a rischio. Andavamo ogni mese dal neurologo e poi ogni 2 mesi dal genetista, perché era evidente che c'era qualcosa che non andava nel suo sviluppo, racconta la madre. Ci sono voluti 3 anni e test in 6 paesi per identificare la malattia rara di Victor. Si chiama sindrome di Coffin-Lowry ed è causata da una piccola mutazione in uno dei geni di Victor. Questa mutazione causa un elevato ritardo psicomotorio, dice la madre. Cognitivamente ha un'età di 8 anni, ma mentalmente e fisicamente ha circa 2-3 anni e si prevede che avrà questo ritardo per tutta la vita. Nuoto, fisioterapia e logopedia hanno aiutato a migliorare la qualità della vita di Victor. La sua malattia non ha ancora un trattamento conosciuto. Avrebbe bisogno di un farmaco per far comunicare meglio i suoi neuroni tra loro e con i nervi, ma non ci sono studi in merito. Il caso di Victor non è unico. L'Unione Europea ha approvato trattamenti per circa 300 delle oltre 6.000 malattie rare identificate, appena il 5%. Spesso sono costosi e con disponibilità limitata. Questo è l'ospedale dove Victor è stato curato per la prima volta. Ogni anno gli esperti si occupano di circa 1.000 persone affette da malattie rare. La diagnosi e gli eventuali trattamenti impongono grandi sfide, come racconta questo medico. A volte le malattie rare sono come un puzzle con 20 pezzi, quindi si va dal neurologo, dal pediatra, dal cardiologo in laboratorio. Si fa un comune esame del sangue e poi un test genetico per avere il quadro della situazione. Ma alcune malattie sono puzzle con più di 2.000 pezzi, piccoli pezzi. Tutto questo richiede molto tempo, ma le persone hanno bisogno di risposte rapide alle loro esigenze e alle loro domande. Consapevole della necessità di nuovi farmaci più innovativi e meno costosi, la Commissione europea intende incentivare gli sviluppatori, rendendoli idonei a ricevere un sostegno scientifico e normativo rafforzato. La Commissione ha proposto anche che gli sviluppatori godano di periodi aggiuntivi di esclusiva sul mercato, durante i quali i loro prodotti siano protetti dalla concorrenza. Eurordis è un'alleanza no profit che lavora per i 30 milioni di europei che, secondo le stime, soffrono di malattie rare.
Un trattamento significa curare solo alcuni sintomi, ritardare l'insorgenza, rallentare la progressione, a volte bloccare completamente la progressione, ma si tratta di un trattamento a lungo termine, molto raramente di una cura. Le esigenze quindi sono enormi. La cosa più importante è la scienza e siamo in un momento eccezionale per questo, perché stiamo assistendo all'arrivo di nuovi trattamenti, tra cui la terapia genica e cellulare, ma non solo, anche la farmacologia, a volte riutilizzando vecchie molecole. C'è quindi un'esplosione di possibilità.
Stando agli esperti, l'Unione Europea è nella posizione ideale per sfruttare al meglio queste possibilità. Ho 3 pazienti qui, forse ce ne sono 3 in Francia e 3 in Finlandia. Guardiamo i dati di tutti questi pazienti, i loro dati genetici e i loro esami del sangue, per vedere se è possibile trovare alcuni biomarcatori, potenziali bersagli terapeutici, e poi magari sviluppare delle sperimentazioni e trovare un trattamento adeguato. Negli ultimi 2 anni abbiamo avuto cure basate sull'editing genetico, oppure si può sviluppare un trattamento neurologico per migliorare le connessioni tra i neuroni. Così imparerà più velocemente e parlerà meglio e più velocemente. Penso che più parliamo di malattie rare, più fondi per la ricerca otteniamo, più ci avviciniamo a fargli avere una vita migliore.
Il World Judo Tour torna in Kazakistan, nella capitale.